one thing is really just do this 5 minutes outside, and you will start to see some changes in your physical well-being and some mental well-being. You will start to notice certain bits, and only if we start to kind of see nature a bit again, and if we start to see the value of it, then we start to change our behaviors.
Hey everyone, this is Jessica Morgenthal from Resilience Gone Wild, and I'm here all lit up as always after a great conversation with a guest with my amazing producer, Kai.
Again, we're going to talk about Lion King. We're going to talk about capitalism. We're going to talk about bad CEOs, good CEOs. And really, I think what came out for me, which was the most profound, was our ability to control the algorithm. So how is that going to weave into honey badgers? Well, I think what you're going to hear is someone who kind of lives courage every day. Ollie, you could just see the inspiration and the commitment and the selflessness to a life of trying to fix this world. And I mean, was that kind of the feelings you had coming off that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, he's a young guy. He's just so passionate and so committed to following his purpose. And, you know, he's really represents the path that we want to show about resilience. You know, like, there is no mistake. You do the best you can, and you take different curves in your chapters of life, and you learn from them, and you grow from them, and then you make choices to be intentional to shift. So, you know, went into loved nature, grew up in nature, went into business because he thought that was the right thing to do, and he has like gotten so much value from that, and then had this discomfort and said, I want to do for good, and take this with me, and like is building this business, Wildya, that brings people together from all over the world to connect and share passion and take action. Like it's about making community happen, conversations that you want to have happen, and then inspiring you without shame or guilt or peer pressure or anything, but like just pure joy and opportunity and hope to make change happen for the good. And like, how great is it to be in conversation and in space with
and my best part for me is I get to be a fly on the wall and just listen to you guys talk. And but before we get to the interview, I wanted to give you an opportunity, because I know you just got back from a big trip. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, life-changing. I have never embedded myself in nature with just nature, where I am insignificant. And I brought my family traveled to safari in the Okavango Delta in Botswana, which is just nothing but nature, and the waves of balance that you recognize. You know, you're never fully in balance. There's, you know, the wild dogs that eat the baby zebra and like totally freak you out and make your heart cry. Right. And the zebra is crying in the background, but the dog's thriving. And then the lions will probably go after the dogs. Like, you know, there's like, there's no such thing as, and Ali and I talk about this, you know, as like some weird exact balance. Like, we're looking for patterns and movement of nature the way they should be. And that was just what we all got out of it. It was just life-changing. And the people we were surrounded with are so deeply, deeply knowledgeable and connected, and speak every animal language there is, and like know what they're saying, and because they care and they pay attention, and like super inspiring. So anybody has any questions, just reach out to me, because I am... Yeah, I'll
have questions, because my wife and their family, they grew up in Zimbabwe for part of her life, and so with our now babies, we're gonna get back there someday. They've always wanted to, but we're gonna wait until the kids are in an age where they'll remember that trip, because it's gonna be quite the haul to get over there. So when we start making that plan, I'll certainly reach out to you, because I'll have questions. Really
it just keeps getting sort of more exciting in my brain. Like, I came back, had a really hard time re-entering and like stepping away from it, because I wanted to keep my head in that space. And now, like, any opportunity I have to like go back to that space and savor it.
Well, let's talk about that. I think that's a great lesson before we get to Ollie, is how can we go back to those kinds of places, right? Like really profound moments in our lives. Like, is there like an exercise we could do to like take us back to that place?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, there's such a deep resilience that you build from it. I mean, just to stop, block out the distractions. You know, we did an episode on flow and talked to Sam Montgomery about it, and learn from the laughing goals. the idea of just shutting out what is distracting and focusing and being super intentional, even for like the shortest moment, and bringing all your senses, or any sense that really, a sound that was meaningful, or an image that was meaningful, some story, and just savoring it. And the more you do that, the more it powers up your brain and builds neural pathways around good stuff instead of distracted fear. And like it's simple. Just one small step. Just stop. And Ali offers that, right? He's like, just go outside for 5 minutes.
Right.
5 minutes will change your life. Every day, just take 5 minutes. Schedule it, whatever you have to do. And leave the phone behind. Leave the technology. Just sit and don't worry about taking pictures. Like sit in a moment of nature, connect a sense or multiple senses, and just changes your brain. So
I love it. All right. So before we start going down to other rabbit holes here, I wanted to read another user review, because we're out there, like, we need these user reviews. It's going to help people get to our show in a more organic way. And so I have a new one for us.
Awesome.
So here it is. I listened to 3 episodes of your podcast, and they are amazing. Using scientific information on other animal species to teach resilience is a great idea. It's a great idea, Jessica. The storytelling is great, compelling, but also relaxing. I like the different podcast lengths. Hey, that's a format we were
wondering about. Yeah.
Different podcast lengths, as I find that some days I feel like listening to longer episodes like this one, and other times I prefer shorter ones like the episode before. The 3rd episode is my favorite. I can't remember 3rd. Maybe it wasn't Parrotfish, was it? Anyways, but I also like the 5th.
That one's coming.
Each episode is clearly made with a lot of care and work. I also appreciate how you include the key points and call to action on the episode page. Another one. This is a useful addition that a neurodivergent audience will appreciate.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Yeah, and we've got a new piece coming with some even shorter episodes.
Yeah.
To bring some other.
You can drop the hint.
Life. Yeah, we're working on some really beautiful short conversations with people about parts of nature, whether it's animals, plants, phenomena like northern lights, whatever, like something that has just changed people and brought this amazing new bounce of strength, resilience, and these conversations are going to be really awesome. So stay tuned for those. They're probably 10 to 15 minutes, and they'll bring a little joy to your life when you want something short.
All right. Well, should we get to Ollie?
Yeah.
All right. Enjoy, everybody.
Welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. Oliver Dauert, who we call Ollie, right? And I am thrilled to share Ollie with you all, because he has like lit up my life since I met him on LinkedIn. Haven't met him in person, but that's because we are thousands of miles away from each other and haven't found a way to be in the same space yet. So I am so excited to share Ollie, because he has this amazing energy around getting this friggin' world back where it once was, and we need to figure out how to bring some of it back. And has done some really cool things. And Ollie introduced me to the honey badger as his spirit animal. And we need to hear the story of your honey badger on your jacket, because it really like makes a big statement about who you are, and just why honey badger is your spirit animal. Because I have so many thoughts on that too, but I want to hear it from you. So welcome. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. Thank you so much for everybody that joins us for this conversation. And we'll try to live up in the next minutes to this really warm and awesome intro. Like you put the bar very high, but I will try to hit it and jump over it. So yeah, thank you so much for having
always.
me. No, I'm originally from Germany, and I grew up like loving nature. And we're gonna discover here a bit in this conversation, like where it got me, but studied business, realized that, we have, especially in the business world, we have a lot of work in front of us, like how we have to do better, especially in the biodiversity sphere. And so like sooner or later, I ventured out of this. And so, that's where Jessica found me.
I don't know. That sounded like this really simple transition. Like, I was in business, I grew up in nature, love nature, just made the shift.
Yeah.
That's not honey badger, man. That's like, that sounds way too easy, way too simple, way too like, I'm in this other space and that's all easy. But I'm going to go back and go, okay, first of all, what came up for me was this whole, I grew up in nature, loving nature, which I didn't. I grew up in New York City, and it took me many decades to get to this place. And people like you brought me along with so much positive energy. But like, just go back to that moment, like, growing up loving nature.
Yeah.
Tell us about how that created the brain that you have, and how you think, like, you've met a lot of people on the way. I mean, I see it in the interaction that you have. And one of the things that blows me away about you is that you bring people into this deep connection and love of nature in the most gentle, welcoming, like non-judgmental, just beautiful way. And I so appreciate that. It was a big influence on me. Tell us how those people listening who didn't start out with the brain that you had high on nature, like, can get there too,
Yeah. I had to be honest, I'm also like more of a hybrid child. So I grew up in Berlin. So Berlin, similar to New York, maybe a bit more greener. So we have a bit more forest. I was never in New York, but at least from the sound of it, often like we have a bit more parks around and a bit more forest. So I was growing up a lot.
We don't have any forests right near New York City, I have to say.
Yeah. No. So
we have Central Park, and I did go across the street, but sorry.
So we have that a bit, and that helped obviously. But then also, like, every weekend we used to go a bit like outside of Berlin. It's basically surrounded by a very rural state, and so there's like tons of forest. And my parents, they were gliders, so we basically spend our weekends like in this like airplanes, or this gliding airplanes. And so
like a bird, like you started out living like a bird.
That's pretty much. Yeah, so they spend we spend our weekends there, and I mean everything was surrounded by like forest, and so I was like outdoors a lot during the weekends, but during the week I was also like living in city, and there was not like it was not busting with wildlife. I think one of the earliest memories that at least I can come back to, and where I try to decode like my journey, is The Lion King. So The Lion King came out when I was like 3 years old, and so that had like a huge influence on me, and I think that got like me. I mean, I grew up in Berlin, and for some reason I always was in love with Africa. So it must come from like Lion King, and like later on in life it brought me to Botswana, where Jessica had just been in the places, and so I always tried to decode it. And definitely Lion King was like one of the big influences. My mom was really like nurturing it from a young age. We have a really beautiful natural history museum in Berlin, so we have the biggest dinosaur skeleton in the world actually there, of a brachiosaurus. And so I got so popular in that museum, and every day I was begging her to go with me, that sooner or later I actually got free entry. So like she was really supportive and nurturing it from a young age. And even crazy stuff like we have something a bit similar like a carnival, where we dress up in different things. And so like all my friends, they dressed up as like policemen, firemen, what other astronaut, all of these kind of classics. And what did I want it to be? I wanted to be an elephant seal.
Oh my God. Did you do it?
Obviously, like back in that days, there was no elephant seal costume. I don't know if that changed by now. And so she had to make it. And so she was always...
we have to make a promise that if you can dig out a picture of you in that elephant seal coat, we will attach it to the notes for this podcast, because I want to see it.
No. And so like she has been very, very supportive in that young age. But I mean, one of the things that then happened, and I always want to come back to this, because you asked me, where can other people that maybe didn't have that maybe supportive environment, or where so nobody in the family was connected to this? Like, I lost myself along the road as well. It was not like, I started here and then and the more I learned about nature, it was like a straight way up. No, not at all. It was like losing myself along the way as well. For example, when I was a teenager, I got into soccer, and like you start to date, and you start to have peer pressure, and now you need to fit in. And so nobody really was talking about nature. Nobody was really into nature. And so I lost myself during that years. Like my entire teenage years, I was not doing anything basically about nature at all. And then I was very privileged that after high school, I could go to Australia for a year. And there I just realized, like, why should I live a life for other people and just pretend and try to hide myself the entire time? Why should I not really give it all and try to pursue what I love the most, which was nature? And then I had to make the tough decision. Okay, there were basically two routes. either I'm going to study marine biology, ecology, zoology, something related to my biggest passion, wildlife. Or in my head, I was like, or I should study business. And why should I study business? I realized that in our modern world, almost nobody is unfortunately listening to the scientists, to the specialists when it comes to like, hey, polar bears are important, orcas are important, ants are important, ferns are important. Nobody unfortunately is listening to them, but who are we listening to quite often? The Bill Gates, the Elon Musk, and so on. And unfortunately, I would love to say that was like 10 years ago and that changed. Unfortunately, if you look in that world, it still didn't change. And so those people and those companies, they have a huge influence on us. And so I was like, okay, if I want to help biodiversity, it doesn't matter that much what happens with my life. And if I'm happy, because I'll be honest with you, I'm the most happiest in the African bush or in a jungle.
Oh my God, happy place, right?
But the most important thing is if I want those places to keep existing and if I want other species to keep on thriving or like actually start thriving again and to keep on existing in the future, then my happiness doesn't matter as much. I needed to actually try to understand like, okay, how is the system working? How can we intervene in the system? How can we maybe use the skills and the technology and all the approaches that companies are using us basically to sell us more stuff that we don't need? And I mean, one of the best example is Nike, a fantastic marketing machine. Basically, they sold us the idea that if you buy plastic shoes, then you become the super athlete and so on. And that is very powerful. So how can we use this kind of storytelling techniques and so on to actually try to bring people back to nature and try to show them like how awesome nature is and how dependent we are on it. Yeah. And then I said like, okay, need to study business, lost myself again, because now you're studying business. Nobody else, like not too many people like nature again. Yeah. Then consulting comes
Capitalism, baby. Like we need to just be about making money, like not about how we make it or what gets used up or taken advantage of, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you're back again in another bubble and you get kind of caught up and you do your internships. And I was doing internships in all kind of technology companies from e-commerce to mobility to travel tech to obviously NGOs and lost myself again. And it was like, well, Ollie, why did you set out to do this? I set out to do this to protect, restore nature as much as possible. And where are you right now? And that kind of reflection came especially hard in COVID when we were all locked up. And I had like a very, very critical self-reflection where I was like, Ollie, you always defined yourself in your head. You were always talking about like, you're such a nature lover and you're such a... And I told myself, BS. That was like all BS, all things that I made up because in my head, I was this nature lover and that person that shows up for nature. But my daily actions didn't reflect this at all. I didn't work in nature. I didn't read that much about this. I didn't continue to watch that many documentaries. I didn't get any further education in it. I didn't dedicate my career to it. Like nothing ended up. And I was like, okay, that needs to change. So from there on, I basically took it down the rabbit hole. And I mean, I don't want to bore like people too much. But
no, I mean, it's a really important story, right? Like we need these crises to stop and shake us up and say, why are we so uncomfortable? Like what is wrong with the way we're living our lives without a sense of purpose, without alignment with our values? Like it's all about scarcity versus abundance, right? Like it's this mindset that we get built into us that we need more. Whatever it is, you got to have more and you got to have more money to make more. And that's the goal, that's the path to happiness, which is complete BS, right? Like nothing is going to make you happy in that short-term materialistic thing. But we get sucked in. I mean, that's the world is operating on. And I went to get my MBA during Milton Friedman era, long before you. And like, that was the only message, right? It was like, capitalism, free market, like it's all about the money, baby, and it can really screw with your head. And the peer pressure, the people you end up finding yourself surrounded by is so important in this story. Like, I'm clawing my way out of the conversations that I don't want to be having and joyfully into the conversations I want. And you know what? They're not all positive. Like people are scared. People are even more scared right now because of, COP, that, the recent conference there, people, globally didn't make a commitment to move forward in the ways that we need the world to move forward and the commitments we need to make. And, somebody posted on LinkedIn that, Elon Musk said eating meat is not, just for example, right? Like, did you put, I don't know if it was that you posted that, like eating, there was a recording of him, eating meat has no impact on the environment. Like, there's things out there that have so much power, language that's out there. And if you just, have the honey badger courage, right? To like and you exude that, like that story of you're saying, like this isn't working for me. And I'm sure there was some calculation there about how am I going to support myself and my family? And like this, there is a toss up, right? Like, and we've talked about this, like you have to actually be able to support yourself. And one of the things I want to, put out there is like, I know that you're running a program to help people to find work in this space so that they have the confidence to know that they can follow their values and, align with their purpose and passion, and that there is a future in it, because otherwise we go back to just being about grinding through and surviving and doing things that don't feel good. Right. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit it on the nail. You spoke now about a couple of things, I think. Unfortunately, especially like really influential people like Elon Musk, not only does he have, for example, the financial backing to really support whatever he wants to do, he also has like a very strong audience. I mean, if you just look at the recent elections, you can always like try to pinpoint, okay, what were like really influential moments, but that he kind of came out for like Trump, just like, and then Trump winning the election. Now, did he win it just because of Elon Musk? No. But like these kind of signs that are very, very important, that just shows like how much power and influence these kind of people have. And I think we unfortunately in our society, we often celebrate the wrong role models. I think like you don't need to like him, and there's plenty of things I'm against. He is very, very smart though, and he's very calculated and he's very innovative. So you definitely have to give him that, and you have to even when you don't like people. Also, sorry to out myself, but I'm not a really big Trump supporter. But what you can I'm always, even like with those bad folks, I'm always like, or like the people that are not really aligned with my own values, I'm like, okay, but what can I learn from them? Because in the end, they succeeded in something that is going a lot against my own values, but they still managed, and even a lot of other people's values, but they still managed to get through whatever they wanted to. And so what can we learn from them? And especially as a society, I think we have to come into actually celebrating positive champions and give them much more of a platform. So there's a really strong contrast. And for all the people that don't know her, Google Chris Tompkins. She shows like the other way that is possible with money. So she was like the CEO of Patagonia. She was one of the first team members that joined Patagonia. And she actually at one moment, she pulled out and she said like, okay, this is not like my major mission anymore. She married somebody, and they decided to just start buying back private land and creating national parks, protect them, and then giving them back to the people of that country, of Chile and
South
Argentina.
America mostly. Yeah.
And so it's just incredible where also like money and influence can do something very, very positive. So when people always say like, money is evil, money itself is not evil. That is like, it is a tool. And so it's always important, how did you get your money? Was that ethical? And how did you come about to get this? And the second one is, what are you going to do with that money? Because money in the end is just like the reflection of our society. And like in the end, it moves. I mean, you can't even grasp it most of the time if you don't have cash, So it's always about like how we can use it. And Chris Tompkins has one of the best examples how somebody took matters into their own hands and invested it to protect, restore it for the future generations. And I think that's really powerful. However, who is more well-known? It's not Chris Tompkins, but it's Elon Musk. So
it was interesting though, because she built Patagonia into a huge global brand that has a side agenda of caring about the world and doing good and sourcing, in positive ways. But it was still a profitable, hugely profitable brand, and still is. And her husband was North Face, right? So like, he built
North
a
Face
huge
and Esprit.
Yeah, and Esprit. I mean, those are like, again, like major you would think, major profitable brands, that global brands. And, they were, at least it was incredibly lucky, strategic, whatever I think there's some luck there, that she was able to align her work life with her personal passions and doing good, and then transform that, when she had the resources and she was done. But, I talk about and think about purpose and teach about purpose a lot. And, you can either be in that space, like you've made this choice, right, to go from the business space, and I have in many ways too, to the nature space. And if you're in the, just to get through the job and do something good, but come out with the money to live the life you want and to give in the path that you want to give, to support that way, as opposed to actually doing the work. You're supporting other people doing the work. I had this great conversation with Wildya.earth, who's the CEO of Loggerhead Marine Life Center, who, we went to that place where, you need to have super high respect for donors who are, however they made their money, hopefully aligned with the values that we all believe, that we want to believe that they believed in. They're giving to support the things that are going to help us, that are helping this earth, and helping others and that kind of thing. So, if you're lucky enough to be able to align both and be working and making money in the field that makes you 100% happy, that's really cool. But at least, to honor that work can just be for money, and then to give you the lifestyle and the ability to support what you want to support kind of stuff, and get involved in that on your non-work life. So,
that's unfortunately, that is, I'd be totally honest, because I'm always like to be like straightforward with people. It's like, you right now in the free market, you get rewarded. You get higher rewarded for doing bad than if you get do something good. So that's always like a spoiler alert. So if you're in to make as much money as possible, then sorry, I think you can turn off that because it's not the direction that we're going to go in the next minutes.
But let me push you back on this. So, like, you think about Elon Musk, right? And he's invested in solar, and he's invested in electric, changing the whole business model. Originally, like, was it to make money? Sure. But it wasn't, there's some pathway, which is why it surprises me that there isn't more in his rhetoric around caring about the earth. It's weird to me, but who knows what path he's taken over time.
I think he took like quite a strong position with the different following, but but initially, of course, like for example, if we take the rocket company, then like it produces much less waste than what NASA operations did. So definitely really positive. Electric vehicle, better than original cars, but still cars. So I would push back always, like, of course, if we have autonomous cars and in the future, we don't need as many cars because nobody owns cars, and you can just like they're just like driving the entire time. Whereas right now,
that is the goal.
So I think if we go to that place, then I would give him that. Right now, I would say like, okay, not there yet.
Holding out,
but let's say as a default, like with Elon Musk is maybe a specific case where you can like debate about this. But in general, I would say like right now, I mean, if you look at very, very the most valued companies, it's like if you kind of promote overconsumption, if you promote like fossil fuels and so on, then usually you end up with a higher salary than the people that, let's say, like how can we protect more rainforests? How can we restore corals and so on? So those folks that don't make the same living. However, one of the things really practical, because one of the things that you ask, and I think I really love, is like, okay, but what can people that now listen to this, what can we really do? Because maybe we're not the Chris Tompkins, we're not an Elon Musk. So what can we really do? One of the first things that is very pragmatic, I calculated my dream salary, and not dream salary in terms of like, how much do I want to make, but how much do I need to make in order to follow my dream, which was for me like 24/7 biodiversity. The stuff that I'm doing now, that I have this conversation, that I can write about bubble barriers of whales, that I can write about and talk about honey badgers. That is my dream. That is like really, and what kind of money do I actually need to sustain myself? So that's also not like that you have to cut down on everything and you need to live in a shack. And no, but it just means you make a differentiation between like, okay, all of the illusion things that you think is going to make you happy, the fancier car, the bigger house and so on. I think if you start to challenge yourself a bit on that, and if you realize, hey, okay, what do we need to realistically? Maybe we need 50 square meters. Maybe we are like a family of 3. And so maybe we need like 70 square meters. And is one car enough? Yeah, actually, we can make it work. Or do we even need a car? So there's like all of that stuff. And you can actually then calculate how much you really need in order to sustain your family. Because one of the things that is really, really important is if you want to bring change to the world, never forget that you are the engine behind this. And so you also need to take care of that engine, so you really need to make sure that you're in for the long game. And you can't be in for the long game if you go like for a month, you burn yourself out and then you are exhausted. It's really about like these kind of challenges that we're facing when it comes to climate, biodiversity. These are like lifelong missions. And so you have to approach it a bit from that angle as well. So it's very important financially that you calculate really something that gives you a bit of stability, because it's not a big help if you go and pursue your dream and every night you have sleepless nights, how the paycheck is going to come in at the end of the week, or for some people, sometimes it's maybe even shorter. So the dream salary really helped me to figure out, hey, this is what I need for all the fixed costs, and even giving myself a bit of a buffer to also go to a restaurant or go on holidays. That's what I need. And I realized I was making, at that moment already, I was making more than what I needed. And I said like, okay, now what kind of activities can I do to ensure that I get that? And then you can slowly get your way into that. And again, that also doesn't mean that, hey, David, you have to leave your job right after listening to this podcast. Not at all. It just means like try to create like the first steps towards like calculating that. And then whatever skills, whatever passions you have, what can you maybe monetize to slowly get you where? And when you then add like maybe 20%, 30%, some other people say 50%, some people say 80% of that dream salary, then you know that, okay, there's a really high chance that if you go 100% into this, that you will make more than even your dream salary. And that's something that really, really helped me a lot to give me like this final push to actually quit my job and go fully into biodiversity, because I was just realizing, hey, this is actually not as scary as I thought it would be.
You brought up so many things that I want to just like pursue. One of them is, see if I should have written them down, list them, but one of them is somewhere along the way we had started to talk about the fact that you chose to build a business that was a for-profit, not an NGO, which was I think is really important, like to really understand business and so I want to pursue that, and also money and the dream salary was only part of it, and you brought up some other parts, like in coaching there's this whole wellness wheel, right? And it's a balance, and you need to look at you can draw it with 8 or 7 or 6, whatever different quadrants or parts of your life, and one of them is financial security, and then you rate it from like 1 to 10 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And then you talk about what the challenges are and what's working. You've got physical wellness. You've got spiritual wellness, like being in, whatever spiritual means to whoever it is. Like for me, and I'm guessing for you these days, I might be wrong, that, it's about being like in nature and in that space of, that's, spiritually satisfying. To I think some of the people in the world that we're looking at, but there's spiritual wellness, there's learning, there's education, like to make sure that you have time and space in your life to grow. It's about whatever way you want to grow. Maybe that's growing physically, maybe that's growing, it has to be a full picture. So you said you might have a sleepless night because you're worried about money, but that's huge, right? Like you need to have this balanced life before you walk away from whatever you're doing, at least 60-80%, whatever it is, so that you don't find yourself like collapsing in fear and scarcity and all that, right? What comes up for you around that?
I think balance is a beautiful thing, because sometimes there's even this concept of nature, is that nature is always in an equilibrium, and it's always
it's not
super balanced. But I mean, even in nature, we don't we don't have that either. So really, really quick example is like, if you have rabbits and you have, let's say, wolves, sooner or later, it can be that there's a very strong year where there's more wolves, and then more wolves start to eat more rabbits, and then sooner or later there's no rabbits anymore. And if we just imagine there's only those two species, so wolves can only eat rabbits, then sooner or later the wolf population will drop and so on. So like there's always a bit of shift. And I think there's like Wheel of Life, I think this tool that you mentioned, it can also sometimes be confusing that we humans, we're so rational. And so we would see sooner or later in our life, we have it all. We have everything like super balanced and everything is on like the maximum scale. And I personally think this is like one of the flaws in these kind of tools is that just embrace that this isn't quite often not how we are working as a human. There's always things, the grass will always greener be, and there will be challenges, and you will see like, okay, sometimes maybe you have a health issue, sometimes maybe it's something with a loved one. I think then sometimes it's your financial freedom that is maybe in danger. So there will always be things in life. I mean, if you never go through hardships, also like the good stuff won't be really as good. So like, I think this is like, it's always a bit
100%.
mixing. And so I think one of the things with that impact work is like, you need to become very creative when it comes to the financial, how you're going to financially survive from this. But then in exchange, you get like it's very meaningful. And for example, it's like what I learn and the motivation and the energy that I have and the people that I meet, it's just like day and night with the work before it. So in the end, it's always about like, okay, what are the trade-offs that you're willing to make and that also in the season of life that you need. For example, sometimes I talk with parents and they feel a bit bad because they can't do more in terms of like impact. They can't leave their job because right now, let's say they have maybe a mortgage to pay. And especially if we're talking about the S, to be honest, like if you get like sick, if you want to send your kids to education, housing, like everything gets like, it's much more riskier in the US than to live, for example, in France or Germany, where I spent like most of my upbringing. And so it's a different story again. And so you always need to bring that into context. However, and that's also important, is people can't take it as an excuse. If everybody's always going to say like, but I have my mortgage to pay and this and this and this and this.
And my kid needs a new iPhone.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
so like, nature will always be at the bottom of the priority list. And if it is happening, then sooner or later, we're in a big trouble because it's the base of our life. And so we can't survive without a Tesla. We can't survive without a fancier house. We can't survive without clean water. We can't survive without medicine. We can't survive without food. And that's all that nature is giving us, And so we can still pretend that is not the case, but sooner or later there's payback time. And then like maybe later on in the conversation we can talk about the company bit, because I think that is quite important because I get like sometimes challenged on this. But I think it's important looking back at my history where I was coming from. How can I say, or how can I challenge the Nikes, the Amazon and so on if I don't show another example of how it can potentially
be done? Yeah.
So
yeah, super important conversation. Because there are ways and if you look at Patagonia and you look at Unilever the way it was for a while, like there are some great examples, and Andrew Winston with Net Positive and Paul Pullman, like there's some great examples to follow of companies that made it work to have multiple priorities, like not just share stockholder value, like shareholder value over like different stakeholders, which is the coaching work I do. Who are your other stakeholders and how can we look at this in a longer term view that serves all the other people in your universe, not just the short term money. So I would love to go there. I want to offer one more. I love what you said was so unbelievably important about, we're never all in balance. And it was so interesting, like, out in the bush in Botswana, we're watching wild dogs who took down a baby zebra. And it was like, God, that's balance, right? And like the wild dogs were there because the lions were somewhere else. That's like, they leave when the lions come. Like, it's not a happy circle where everything's all in balance. Like, and if we recognize that, like, you can't be at happy or whatever, however you want to measure that ultra in all those areas of wellness, we need to just be paying attention to when we're in a state that's not healthy, that's not a good place. And I look at polarity, and I like that language. If you're all in on nature, and you're like, okay, I'm going to take this, just an example. I'm going to take, I'm going to cut back on everything. I'm going to cut back on my social life, and I'm going to cut back on investing in and resources, and I'm going to work out myself in my house. I'm not going to do whatever it is that you're cutting back on. And you're going to say, I'm going heavy into nature right now. And that's one part of your spiritual wellness, right? You have to pay attention, like we do with so much we're not paying attention to these days, to what is too uncomfortable. What is at the point of such discomfort that you need to focus on it and figure out how to rebalance. You need to pull back from the extremes, all in on money. I know so many people who are like, I'm going to spend the first 10 years of my life, or then it's 12 years and then it's 15 years, whatever, making as much money as possible. And I'll wait for happiness, and I'll wait for health, and I'll wait for whatever. I'm like, not a good thing, right? So it's so funny because I got so inspired by this honey badger thing, right? This is just such a crazy cool creature. And I have to say, honestly, and I think you're in the same place, and a lot of people who are listening and who hopefully will move in this direction, no matter what creature or plant, flora, fauna, fungi, whatever it is so friggin' cool. It's mind-blowing, right? I got totally blown away, as did my whole family. We came back from a week safari, and the coolest thing everybody saw was the dung beetle rolling the ball of poop, right, of elephant poop, that is 10 times the size of the beetle, over wood and long distances to grab a mate who likes his ball of dung. And while doing that, is leaving seeds along the way and leaving moisture. And I don't know, there's the coolest thing in the world. Who knew the dung beetle was at the moment the coolest animal? So the honey badger, that was last week's coolest animal to me, because I went to visit them. First you told me about them, and then I learned about them, and then I went to visit them at the Naples, Florida Zoo, which was such a highlight. And I hung out with the zookeeper for an hour, and I have the notes for the show. We'll post some pieces of the interview that I did with her. Super awesome, lovely woman.
Nice.
Named Mary Catherine Mitchell, who is just so passionate about the animals she takes care of. And it was the coolest thing, because I have to say that what I was blown away by these animals and the relationship to you. So I want to kind of go there for a minute, and then I do want to talk about the company format in terms of being because I'm into that as well. But is it they prance? These are the most gritty, courageous, don't give up. This is Ollie, right? I'm seeing Ollie, but the other part of him that I saw that I thought was the coolest thing, and I hope if you haven't seen them in person, that you get a chance to just sort of see them from afar, is that they have this light step, and they prance. Put the video at the end in the show notes, but how cool are these characters? They have this super positive energy. They're not these aggressive, vicious looking. They're happy looking, bubbly, just driven, and I'm gonna make it happen, whatever it is. So and you've got this honey badger on your shirt. Just go down the honey badger thing for a few minutes, because I just have to savor it and savor the time with you about honey badgers and courage and all that.
This is already, I think, one of my highlights of so I've been 2 years now on this journey, and I think this is the first podcast where I can actually go down the honey badger hole. So this is already this is already worth it. All the 2 years, all the hustling, all the sleepless nights, this is already worth it. That finally we can talk a bit about the honey badger. So maybe where it's coming from, it's also very, very silly. It's one of the YouTube videos, I don't know what it was, I think it was 8 years ago. There was just a comedic guy that made pretended to be a National Geographic narrator and just make jokes about the honey badger and how cool they are and how they don't give a shit. And so that kind of I found that so hilarious. And it was one of those first moments where I was hey, hey, this is how we can get people again reconnect to nature. Because let's be honest, as much as I love nature documentaries, who's watching that nowadays? Like there are a couple of outliers on Netflix sometimes where a bit more people watch it. But if you compare it to Squid Game or if you compare it to, I don't know, all kind of Netflix shows, it's just a drop in the bucket. And so that YouTube video was like a bit like, ooh, this is really interesting how this communicate. This is because you laugh about this and you're having a really great time, but at the same time, you learn stuff about them.
Oh, totally.
So I was
100%,
like,
right?
This is incredible from the communication point of view. And the more then I started to learn about the honey badger, unfortunately, it's still quite an elusive animal. So first of all, you rarely get to see it. So I think I did like around like 100 game drives or something like so in the safari in Africa, across like different countries from South Africa, Botswana, Uganda, everywhere. And I saw one. So,
oh man, I was the odds were against me. Okay.
Yeah. So like, and I saw it in Botswana, and it was exactly the situation that Jessica described. It was like just doing their thing, walking, really chilled, and we're just like the people in this truck at the time just like lost it because we were all like talking about this. Yeah, what animal do you still want to see? What's like, because sooner and later it's like silly, but you get a bit like fatigue. So after a while, you've seen the giraffes, you've seen
yes, elephants everywhere.
Sometimes you don't appreciate them anymore. So what's the next thing, And I was like, I'd love to see a honey badger, and we were even always screaming like HP, we're going to see HP. And so
you call the energy was honey badger energy.
Yeah. So it's just like this, this animal, and so. Then, of course, like I did also like a safari guide training where I was learning more about animals. And even if you go into the books where everything is written about like animal behavior or the paw prints or the noises that animals make, quite often the animal that gets left out is like the honey badger. In comparison to like elephants, sometimes you have like entire books about them and so on. About honey badger, there's not that much written about them. And I always was a fan a bit of the underdog. That's like just something in my life that always like comes to me. And what I liked about the honey badger so much is that one thing is it is like fierce. So if it gets attacked or if it's like it doesn't back down, no matter like how big the odds.
And it's built for that, right? Like it's like physically has all these amazing adaptations so that it doesn't have to back down. You're like, how is it possible? But it's super adapted to like not friggin' backing down.
No
like,
matter if it's like,
I see you that. There's you. Like
exactly. No matter if it's like bees, if it's like something small, if it's like snakes
Cobras,
with their venom, if it's like a lion, if it's like leopards, hyenas, no matter what's gathered them. And they always like manage to defend and like fight things off. And so I'm always somebody like by now I am very sure like who I am. And so by now I know that like biodiversity, nature, that's going to be my life mission. And I'm not going to back down from this. And so right now the odds are against us. Like it's again, like also like an illusion if you think like we're currently like on a winning track. That's not the case. We're definitely the underdog here. But we keep on fighting. If we think that is like the most important bit that we have to fight for, then we don't back down from this. And so that's like also like was one of the things that I found like very, very impressive. It's also very, very smart and very innovative animal.
Yep.
So there's another, like if people really want to go down the honey badger YouTube route, there's another YouTube video that shows how smart they are, which is called Stuffles, which was like a South African honey badger, and he managed just to escape all the time from his enclosure. Wow. And he did this through various ways, from using the tools that the caretaker left inside to piling up rocks to using he sooner or later got like a female honey badger into the enclosure. So then he was using the female honey badger to get out of the enclosure. They managed to open doors, just like crazy intelligent animals too. And not to say that I'm super intelligent, but very innovative I try to be innovative in the approaches and try to come up with ideas or things that we maybe haven't tried, or try to put them together in a new way. Because at least so far, the things that we tried didn't seem to work. If we go like the scientific route, right now, we're not like really winning. People are not listening to scientific route. We also see that in climate. The spiritual route, we definitely tried. I mean, there was an entire generation of like hippies that went really like very much the spiritual route. And that generation became actually one on which watch we had like some of the most devastating, basically, decline of nature.
Crazy,
happening.
right?
So it's like, again, like talking to this rationality, you have like this really strong generation that like pushes the zeitgeist so much, and still you end up with that end result. So that apparently spirituality didn't convince like a critical mass to do something about this. So now what can we do? What are now the things that we can maybe tap into? So I started, for example, with mental health, because I saw like a mental health pandemic, and I was like, okay, maybe nature can help in that. Or now I'm a bit more like, okay, giving people more pragmatic solutions. I show people how it affects their physical well-being, their mental. So I'm just always trying to explore different angles, how it can resonate with people, because we all have skin in the game,
Yeah.
And so I just always try to be innovative about these kind of approaches.
You've also been you put out really positive energy, rational, like not pretending that everything's great, but like, there's this positive energy about just take the next step. Like, just move forward, do something. Stop making excuses and do something. And if we all just do something to move forward, it'll make a huge difference. Like, if we just keep sitting, waiting to think we'll make a difference and to think we matter, like, you put it out there that like every single step matters, and such a critical message, like to start with the small, but the big, like, Gandhi and all the great voices have said, now I'm drawing a blank, you probably know this, who said, the stuff that happens with small groups of people taking the next step kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, so tell us about Wildya and about running the business the way you are, and how that's going to get us, moving forward to this, these tipping points that we're struggling with and all that.
Yeah. So basically, Wildya is my attempt to do exactly that. How can we? So we have knowledge. So by now, science is very, very clear. If you are listening to this and you never heard about biodiversity, or if you didn't hear about biodiversity loss, no problem. If you go nowadays, ChatGPT and so on, they're so good. And then they really, or like Perplexity gives you even like the resources where it gets the knowledge from, so that you can always double check that it's serious. But like the general perspective is like quite often like the science is very, very clear. We can't afford, there's planet boundaries, and right now we are outside of those planet boundaries, especially when it comes to our life on Earth. So everything, from how Jessica said, like from plants to fungi to animals, everything is out of like the comfort zone of the Earth, and we need to bring it back, because we are so dependent on it in everything that we depend on really in life, not like the fancy gadgets, but the needs. When we're talking about always like, okay, what are the vitamins and what are the painkillers? Nature is like our best when it comes to really like, okay, we really can't afford to lose that. The Teslas and so on, it's more the vitamins, which make maybe the life a bit like sweeter.
I've not heard that. I love that. That is a really cool, I like that whole metaphor. The interesting part of what you just said, or lots of that was interesting, but like the part that hit me the most was the message that I don't think people get, right? Like that the Earth will survive. The Earth lives on a completely different time scale. We are this tiny, tiny blip of being on Earth, right? Like literally, there's all these different measurement in nanosecond, right? And we have done the destruction of millions of years worth of change, but the Earth will recover in some way. We just won't be on it, right? So like if we just keep thinking super short term, and we pretend that we don't need to focus on our next generation and next generation, like the next 7 generations, which is a kind of a mantra in the nature space, like and in systemic space, like we're kidding ourselves, right? Like we're the ones who aren't going to be here. The Earth will be here. So what are your, it seems like that's the path that you're kind of heading towards.
No, I think it's one of my friends, he made like this, he exposed me the first time to this. Right now we often see like humanity but as a cancer, quite often like in the environmental space, or like people even that are not in the environmental space, they see humanity but as a cancer, because we're so self-destructive in a certain way. And then he said, like, he exposed me to it, but we can actually also become like a keystone species in a way that we could, if we wanted to, we can actually bring life. We are so powerful by now, we could actually bring more life to the galaxy. I mean, this is like just like crazy, but we
keep going.
First
that's really
start,
cool.
we could first start in our home planet, and we just like, first, before you expand to any other planets, then maybe let's get our stuff together here. Let's maybe start discovering what everything that is in the ocean. We still know about the ocean much less than about space. Let's start with discovering. We don't even know how many species we have. So we are having like flatmates, and we don't even know what their names are, what they're doing, what they're up to, how we depend on those flatmates. Those flatmates are cooking for us the entire time, and they're cleaning up, and we don't even notice that they're there. So
wait, I know what you're talking about, but just in case people don't get what you're saying, which is just such a fabulous way of putting it, like, do you have like one example of a flatmate that is cleaning up for us or cooking for us that like you can offer us?
No, for example,
such a
beavers.
great way to put it.
Yeah, I think beavers are a really great example. Beavers are important. Like, they're, after us humans, they are the animal that has probably the biggest impact in terms of like how it architects like their environments. And so by building like dams, by creating floods, they actually reduce the flood risks. So it sounds a bit like counterproductive, but they create like a system where there's a natural water flow. So actually, where beavers are, yes, maybe have like a flood like in a house or whatever because they decided to go wild there, but overall they actually reduce floods. So really great flatmate to have. Or they also actually produce higher water quality. So again, they're cleaning, they're like our tap water that comes, for example, they would clean up that tap water. That's just like one example. And there's so many, for example, one of this a bit like heartbreaking examples, but I think it's important because there's a high likelihood that we all lost somebody that we love to like cancer, is like 75% of cancer medication is like to some extent like coming from nature or like inspired by nature. Some components are nature. Just imagine that. Like I lost people in my life because of this crap. And like, just imagine like we wouldn't have that sort of medicine, then there wouldn't be the chance to save a couple of people, or at least make their journey more doable, so that they're actually not going to suffer. Just imagine we wouldn't have that. And so like that's why that's the beauty a bit with nature, is like we depend on it, and so it touches all our lives, and so it's just like the first step. So coming back to your initial question is like, okay, first we need to create awareness that people are aware of that stuff. Because I mean, as our cities, we spend 90% of our time nowadays indoors, especially if you're living in America. If you live in Europe, there's a good chance 90% of the time you spend indoors.
Oh, it's so upsetting just to hear that stat.
Yeah,
but it's true. Yeah, right.
Really upsetting. But that's the status quo. Then you have 10%. Okay, where do you spend that 10%? Quite often you spend it on the commute or whatever. You spend
quote unquote
outside,
outdoors, but I don't know if
in a city that often doesn't reflect nature as well. So where are you supposed to get in contact or know stuff about nature? In our education system, it doesn't really play a huge role. No. In our businesses, it doesn't play a huge role. On our smartphones, it doesn't play a huge role. So where to get people that awareness? It's like you can't really, you can't get aware if you're not exposed to some sort of contact.
But it's about priorities in terms of what the information flow is. Like, you just brought light to some of it. Like, we do not talk about the fact that pharmaceuticals are primarily nature-based. They are mimicking nature's curing itself, right? Like, crazy stuff. And we are not talking about it. We're not talking about the incredibly valuable metals and minerals that are used in technology these days, right? And that they're like, we're starting to dredge the ocean, which we don't know much about, to get like to destroy nature, to use nature. We're not talking about it. We're talking about the cost of an iPhone and how cool, how much the stock goes up of Apple, right? Like, that's the key. Like, how do we start talking about it more so that people get how friggin' important it is?
Yeah, exactly. That's like a ruffle, but I see it like a bit as a 3-step journey. So first, you need to be aware of that there's even a problem, or that there is like a huge value in it as well. So not always just like seeing it from a negative perspective, but just seeing from a place of awe, like crazy how grateful I can be, like that nature is around and that we still have some species and so on. So awareness, because without all the other steps, they can't follow. The second one then is knowledge. So you need to build at least a certain bit of knowledge of like what's causing these problems. Why does it matter? So for me now, it's like easy. I can grab an example from mental health. I can take an example from physical health. I can take you an example from the economics perspective. but that's because I sit down and I learn stuff. And there's nowadays, I mean, there's beauty. Like here, you're listening now to Jessica's podcast. There's there's newsletters, there's like books, there's whatever fancies your boat. I mean, even Google came out now with something where you just type in you just drop a PDF, and now they're gonna create like a podcast out of this.
Right? Isn't that wild?
So like it's just like
Yes.
So there is definitely ways how you can learn that stuff. So the second
But you
one,
have to choose. Right? It's
Yeah.
about choosing what you're bringing into your
Yeah.
life. Like it has to be intentional, or else
Yeah.
it's letting you happen. Like it's active versus passive. If you
Yeah.
just let the algorithms decide what should flow towards you and not realize that you have control.
Yeah.
Or you can take control and say, I don't want to hear dark stuff every day. Like, I don't want to hear politics. How come I keep getting all this news about whatever? It's like, because you're not choosing. You actually have the power to like reset your algorithms and just start choosing what you want to learn and what you want your brain to be thinking about and what makes your brain happy versus stressed and crazy and dark and tight and not communicative and all that stuff. So
Yeah, and that's a beautiful example that maybe people can more relate to than necessarily the stuff that we talk about when it comes to nature. Is like, at first you need to be aware that you are actually in control, and that is not like you, because like a lot of people, they open that app, they open Instagram, and they just take it like, they just like start to consuming it. So the first is awareness, even when it comes to an app, that, hey, you have to some extent, you have to control what you're going to see and so on. Second one is then building up a bit of knowledge, like, okay, how does this algorithm actually serve me? Does it serve me? Does it bring out the worst in me? Does it bring the best out of me? And how can I maybe shape it so that Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn is actually serving who I want to become or who I want to be, rather than the toxic distractions. And then the last one is to actually taking steps. So now you need to maybe unfollow some people. Maybe you need to start like really like scrolling over the stuff that you maybe are curious about, but it's not really serving the purpose, and really start liking some nature content creators and so on. So you then have to sooner or later take action. And especially coming back to your initial question about like Wildya, we try to see it in the 3 steps. Is like, what I do on social media is awareness creation and knowledge. So it's a bit like both of them. I try to tap into trying to increase our bubble, because right now the bubble is too small of people that actually are caring about this, and then creating like awareness, but then also try to make it educational, but also entertainment. So I try to bring a bit of knowledge in there so that people have some breadcrumbs of like, okay, I didn't know that about whales, or I didn't know that I can actually take that my actions actually have an impact on whales. And people often don't know that stuff, and so then knowledge comes in. But the last important bit, and that's very tricky to do on social media, is how do you get now people to act? And I don't know if you saw it in my post, but I would say 80% of my posts I finish with like concrete action items that people can take in order for them to change. But the problem is, there's the next post coming in just a second. So it's not, social media is great for awareness, it's great to transfer some knowledge, but I find it very, very challenging for people to actually then take action. And so how do you catalyze action? Because right now, science is very clear. Awareness is not there yet, but at least, the people, the decision makers, they are definitely aware. They just like choose to ignore it. But so we need action. So how do we get more people to take action? And again, action can be something as in like, hey, I go out now every day for like 5 minutes. Or just today. I just go out today for 5 minutes. And I would just like look a bit around what I can see.
Without your phone.
Hear,
like, don't be on your phone.
Yeah.
Just shut it all off and pay attention to something new in nature, right?
Yeah, exactly. It can be something very small like that. And then it can be something like, hey, I read about that my food has like a huge impact on nature. So maybe I start with like cutting out meat for 1 day. And it doesn't mean, or like sometimes start with one meal. Start with one meal once a week. Is not meat or fish or dairy or whatever. Just like take the tiniest. It needs to be ridiculous. You need to be a bit like, writing that down even seems silly. That kind of action, but start there. And as soon as you start there,
write it down.
Write it down,
Because recognize that it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
And that it moved you forward, and that, you know what, do a little bit more tomorrow and a little bit more tomorrow. And like, this is not hard, and it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Like we tell two people, and then the whole exponential is my like hot button. It's that just bring others along with you. Like send the positive energy out, which is what you do. You're like, and that so much of that depends on people. And I'm the same boat you are, like we start by telling people about, the happy nature, interesting, learning, cool story. And then we get to the calls to action. And you have to get people to be able to hang along that long, right? To like actually be able to pay attention long enough to still be awake and to then feel that they are empowered to do something, not just hear it and like shut it down and then start the next thing. So, I mean, it's a challenge, right? The whole, it's a challenge.
It's a massive challenge because I was just like in a conversation with another friend that has like a rewilding company. And it's just like right now, biodiversity, nature, give it the name that you like, is right now like an afterthought. Like in our daily lives, it's just like it's not a priority in our personal lives for many people, for the vast majority. In our companies, it's not a priority. In our governments, it's not a priority. So it's nowhere like a priority that, well, how can we be surprised about like where we're currently heading? Yeah. And so we need to start to take acting on this because it's not like we have an endless like reserve of like that we can tap into. I always try to compare it again, making it really tangible for people. There's 99% chance that the listener has a credit card. And so you have to imagine nature and biodiversity a bit as this kind of credit card. And what we've been doing so far, we were just like paying always. And that is working fine until sooner or later, somebody is going to ask you to pay up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're building up debt. You're like, you're eating into your future, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're just borrowing against the future, which is what we've been doing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so like sooner or later, the bank is going to come and say like, oh, yeah, you need to pay up. And then you're going to say like, oh, no, I can't pay up. And what's going to happen? Snip, snap, goes the credit card. And the same goes like with nature. We can keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And if you just like read more about the volume of like, I always try to explain it to people as like, if we would do one bad thing to our other species, it would be, nature could probably handle it. It's just like the accumulation of bad stuff that we're doing, that this can't continue forever. And so right now we are basically gambling, okay, who is going to be in that situation? Which generation is going to be at that situation where it's going to be snip, snap, where it's like the credit card is going to be cut? Because biodiversity, like our planet, will sooner or later show us like, okay, that was enough. Now you don't have soils anymore. Now you don't have fresh water anymore. Now you have a messed up climate. You don't have medicine anymore. That will happen if we continue that path. And what I then always like, okay, this is really the hard reality. So snip, snap. And we're like on the best way to get there. However, and that's really important, is we don't have to continue that path. There is still some nature around us. There's still some species that cling on. There's still some pockets left. And now what we can do is we can actually go the other way around. So our credit card is great and we have it and it's good like for really bad days that we have it here, but we can actually start to save up. We can actually start to invest it in a way that we get audacious. Like we never seen this in the capital markets. The return of investment that we would get from nature, it's just like, it's unimaginable. And what we would always benefit, it's like, of course, the other species would benefit by finally being protected, by finally having some more habitat. But in the end, we would be the beneficiary. We would be the people that benefit the species that
long
benefit
term.
Most
like it'll stick, and it's sticky.
And not even that long term. Like that's always the crazy bit. Is as soon as you start, for example, you and your city, you and your community. I just saw like a Wildya member. She was like this weekend. She was going on the streets and was like planting native plants on the like, sometimes you have this grass patch that is just not needed. And she just started to plant like a local plants. And you see that change and you immediately, like after like days, after weeks, after months, let it be maximum a year. You see changes. You start to see more pollinators. So you still start to see more bees and more other insects. And then you start to see more birds.
You make a really important point though, like the quick fix, like you cut down the old forest and then you plant one type of tree. You say, let's plant trees, and everybody plant one quick growing tree, right? So it looks like it comes up fast and it looks like, but that's not biodiversity. Like that is not the long-term solution, right? Like we need to stop and do it with much more intentionality. And I'm to the point of, how do we grab people? Like, how do we get people to raise their prioritization and to take the next step? Like, I approach this podcast with this whole construct of metaphor, right? So like you are the honey badger. You're like the model of, if you feel like that next step isn't going to make a difference, or you just don't have any energy left, or it's too scary. Like, think of the honey badger, think of Ollie, and like, just take one more friggin' step. It'll pay off. And then remember that you took that step. Like, remember that you cut out one half a meal or whatever it is, right? And like, just keep moving forward instead of just getting stuck. So what's the message? I've totally taken tons of your time. What's the message from you and from Wildya? Like, how do you get that assuming that it's take a step, like do something? Like, what kind of language have you found is the most effective so far? Or a couple of things to like just get people to just prioritize and just do something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly testing around with that. So very from an influencer standpoint, so if you're listening to this and you are already kind of, let's say, converted, that climate, biodiversity, and so on is important. I think one of the most pragmatic tips that I can give you is like to listen actually to the person in front of you and try to see like where they're coming from. Because if you start actually by listening and not by try to directly teach and preach, you actually understand their reasoning of like however they see the world and what matters to them. And then you can use those like insights to actually make your case for nature. So when I hear, for example, I have somebody in front of me that is all about finances, then I can make the business case. If there's a person in front of me that is really concerned about their fitness and their physical health, then I can bring these kind of examples. So I think if you're like wanting to positively nudge people in a better direction, then it actually starts by listening and then really adapting your message. Not always like have the same message, but adapting your message to who is in front of you. So that's like for the people that are already a bit steps ahead. And for people that are really like just at the beginning of this and they are listening to this for the first time and feel like, hey, this is cool, I want to give this a go, where they can start with. I always think like the easiest step of everything is really like this 5 minutes of nature. We all have 5 minutes, no matter like we always have other priorities and so on, but 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes like after this podcast.
Right. Like find 5 minutes to be on.
Yeah.
Right. Like it changes you. Like watch the ant, watch the tree, watch the sunset, like watch, just be in that space for 5 minutes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So they have 5 minutes, and that's like everybody can do that. And you just like put your shoes on and you just go out.
Or don't.
And just like, so
feel it. Don't put your shoes on and feel the ground. Get some immunity in you. Like just.
For sure. But that's often like that's always like like a bit like sometimes for people that are just like starting like what I don't go out without shoes, so I don't go usually that way. I go now. I go now like I would say half of the year I work barefoot all the time, and personally for me I realized that this improves really like my physical well-being and also like this like grounding effects and I feel a bit more in the present. So for me it does things, but I think a lot of people don't start there. So I always say like a bit like, hey, just like put on your shoes and just like go out now for like 5 minutes and just like either like don't do anything and just like walk a bit, or like if you're really up for it, then just like have a bit of a look around, have a bit like listen to what's going on, have maybe a smell.
Pick a sense, right? Pick one of your senses.
Yeah, exactly.
And just focus in.
Yeah.
Like I love doing that activity. Like pick one sound channel. Listen to the water, listen to the trees, listen to whatever it is. Like you can't listen to all of it. You can't see it all. You can't hear it all at the same time. Like just pick one small thing and be odd. I don't know. I think that your advice on the other side of it is what I live, which is, we need to just stop the automatic judgment and the automatic, I have something to tell that's more important and that's right and you're wrong. And the win-win-win. Like win-win-win means the other person, assume the other person's 10% correct in whatever it is, that there's 10% truth in whatever, because there is something driving what they're thinking, right? And figure out what the hot button is. Like figure out by listening, like what will they be able to grab onto that will make them feel like they're moving forward in life, right? And that it's going to help them.
Yeah.
And you'd be shocked, right? Like, wouldn't you be shocked? The conversations, like, just to take that approach, like, it's amazing what comes out of those conversations.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, and that's like one of the things that we didn't get to talk that much about, but like one of the things that we, with Wildya, so really in a nutshell, is that we want to empower people to give them back like the agency that they can do something about the current situation, because in the end we have the situation, and now you have like two ways to go. So either you say like you put your head into the sand and you say like, okay, it's not my problem and I'm going to just ignore this. Or you say like, okay, let's do something about this, and at least there can be potentially another outcome, and the outcome that I want to see. And so we're always about like, hey, how can we give more people the tools, the knowledge, the confidence, everything that they need in order to remove as many roadblocks, so that we make building back biodiversity as easy as right now. For example, if you order something on Amazon, it's like flawless. Like you basically have to press a button and like you get the thing,
and you get it that day. Like
So what can we learn? And that's like horrible from an environmental perspective, but what can we learn? And so how can we make rewilding, protection, nature, how can we make that as flawless and as easy as possible? So we're all about like trying to remove as many obstacles in that journey, because like, again, as I said, awareness is one thing, knowledge is one thing, but how can we get people into action mode? That's like all what I'm about. And so that's what we do with Wildya. And one of the things, because we were talking about like conversations, is like one of the feedbacks that we always got from people is like, if you're not necessarily a communicator, or for example, you're like you said, you're coaching, as if you don't have necessarily, if you haven't been exposed to the tools, if you're not necessarily have the confidence to lead a conversation, that is actually quite a tricky one. So one of the things that we now, after listening to our herd members, we realized, okay, hey, maybe let's create actually something offline. Let's create like a product that helps people to do that. And so we came up with nature conversation starter cards.
I love that. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. So that helps people. We haven't launched it yet. It's going to launch like this week or next week when we're recording. And what we wanted to do with this is like, it's a card game of 52 kind of prompts, questions, and it takes people on a conversation journey. So it starts with very simple stuff of just like, hey, what was your favorite animal when you were growing up? But then it goes like deeper and deeper and deeper into the conversation, and you just like bring that card out, and you can just like start this conversation from a very non-judgmental place, and just by doing certain levels, so that you can keep it a bit shallow for if you feel like, okay, the situation right now, let's ease people into it and let's really start with the tip of the iceberg. Then there's really shallow questions, and then you can go deeper and you can deeper, and you end up with things like, okay, what can you actually do, or like, how would you feel if the situation would be messed up, and so on. So we try to create these kind of tools that help people to have just like an easier time to take action, because while we are doing this with a card game, which is like, right now the bubble is too small. We have incredible people. I mean, you are the best example. I mean, what you're doing, what you take your passion,
my friend,
make a podcast, and that you bring like every podcast guest get their own animal, and that you bring all of this. Like, we have people like this, but our bubble is small. We're not getting like the reach. We're not getting the influence. We're too little. But what always comes is usually when the bubble grows, is sooner or later it becomes interesting for decision makers, either for businesses,
because there's influence. There's enough influence,
or governments. They're in the end influenced by our decisions. So if we can increase our bubble, then my theory of change is then we will see changes happening. If it becomes a priority to more and more people within companies, you will see changes within governments. You see, but right now,
making it fun. Like you've come up with this new tool to make it fun. Which is a big part of this. Like, nature should be fun, right? So that I love that there's like cards, and there's a card game, and some gamification. I mean, there's some really good games out there. So, okay. Wrap up, because it's been unbelievable talking to you, but I'm like always trying to not be too much of a too greedy with my guests. Last thoughts on how we can find you, how you can, you've given us some great ways to jump in, but I know you through LinkedIn. How do others find you? How do we get these cards? How do a last message of energizing, just do it, without the plastic.
Yeah, so how people can find me. So like on LinkedIn, I write like daily. So that's like my way of like trying to collect my thoughts and try to get
And
more
it's so
people
interesting.
excited.
Like it's not like it's so not boring to read your posts and you
Yeah.
have videos and like you're like
Yeah.
just get into this nature thing in this beautiful way. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, kudos to nature, because I mean it makes my job like very
Oh, yeah.
easy. There's always
Yeah.
they never run out of like
Totally.
beautiful imagery, or never are out of like boring content, because it's just like it gives you so much. And so yeah, if you're like on LinkedIn, you can find me there at Oliver Dauert. That's Dauert. And then otherwise, if you liked a bit like what that sounded like, that we put you a bit into action mode, then it's Wildya.earth. So that's like WILDYA.earth. And
Yeah,
they
check that
can
out.
find
It's a
you
really good website. It's very cool.
So yeah, they can be part. If you really want to get into action mode, then that's what we try to build.
Yeah. And just check
so
it out. And how cool
that's
is Ollie just an energetic, happy, passionate person? Like get to Wildya.earth and like get involved. Like it's just there's just no pressure. There's just joy and action. So
Yeah, exactly. And so like what if I can ask like for one favor, that is not too much, is like
yeah. Ask.
it's like 5 minutes outside. Like if you're now listening to this podcast and you found a bit like there were some interesting bits in this, then one thing is really just do this 5 minutes outside, and you will start to see some changes in your physical well-being and some mental well-being. You will start to notice certain bits, and only if we start to kind of see nature a bit again, and if we start to see the value of it, then we start to change our behaviors. And that's what, in the end, what I'm really trying to hammer in is like we need to have like behavior change and take
And
action.
drop a note, like do it, and then drop a note to Ollie, drop a note to me, put it in LinkedIn, put it at on the comments in the podcast. Like find us, and we just want to share the joy, like because this is how you spread it, right? Like it's exponential. The just sharing that this works and that it's just super joyful and super productive. So get in touch, be in touch, and then jump into Wildya.earth and connect with Ollie. He's always really accessible. So, which I thank you for.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. Thank
you.
you so much for everybody that was listening, and for giving me the opportunity, Jessica, to talk to you and your audience. And so yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you
Really
so
appreciate
much.
it.
It's been such a pleasure. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Ollie.
See ya.
Bye.
This has been a production of BLI Studios, produced by me, Kai. Follow along with our other BLI produced shows at balancinglifesissues.com/podcast-BLI. Got an idea for the show? Email me, Kai, at balancinglifesissues.com. And don't forget to stay in touch with your host, Jessica, at jessica@winwinwinmindset.com. Anything else to add, Miles?
Yeah,